Welcome to What the Freak. Today I am really excited for this conversation because I actually had a conversation with this special human a few months ago on Instagram Live, and unfortunately the Instagram gods were not shining down upon us on that day, and the video disappeared, unfortunately. So I am excited to be joined by the lovely RockShel today, or Shel for short. Thanks for being here. I'm so glad we get to revisit this conversation. We're going to be diving into topics such as boundaries and consent. We're also intending to talk about just kind of this end of year time we're in right now, and just this unique time with the collective right now and what is unfolding. So I'm super excited to dive in. But first, would love to just give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself, anything you want to share with the audience that you think they might want to know about you, and then we can dive in.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nathan. I'm really excited to be here today and having this conversation with you. I think it's a really important conversation, and I'm really grateful we got to have it and get to have it again now and share with others. And so just a little bit about me. I go by the Lovely RockShel, and I'm a performer. I do burlesque. I'm a dancer as well, and starting to dabble in music a little bit. I am really passionate about boundaries. In college, I majored in gender and women's studies and wrote my thesis on sex education. So I'm really passionate about sex education, consent education, and diving into boundaries and their nuances. And I think we have a lot to learn about them as a collective, and have been learning a lot about them over the last several years as this pandemic has gone on. And so, that's a little bit about me. And I think I'll stop there, pause there.
Cool. Right on. Yeah. Boundaries and consent is also a very important topic to me, because growing up, as we discussed, I felt that my boundaries were violated. And, early elementary school, I started getting bullied, both physically and emotionally. And I think from just a very young age, I learned that I actually wasn't safe in my body. And that's a very challenging way to move through the world. And I know I'm far from alone in that experience. And fortunately have come across a lot of tools and experiences that helped me to heal on many layers of those violation experiences that I had. I think even back then, it's like I wasn't even aware that boundaries were a thing. I was just showing up in the world with my energy, with my joy, and not even realizing there was such a thing, or there could be such a thing as boundaries and consent, and that, there were certain things happening to me that I didn't like, that I didn't enjoy experiencing, but I didn't know how to stop them. And I didn't even know that was within my power, or how to do so. I just wanted to kind of open up the conversation there with just a little bit of my background on boundaries and consent, and one of the most early shaping experiences that I had around that topic. Would love to hear if there's anything you want to share on your end to kind of set a foundation there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really, I can relate and had similar experiences around that. I absolutely had boundaries crossed, and don't feel like I had a lot of boundaries, or similar to you said, like awareness of what boundaries even are when I was younger. And it wasn't until I started getting older and started realizing and looking back on some of the experiences that I had, and looking back on how I felt in certain situations and how I felt in my body, and or lack thereof, like wasn't present in my body, did I realize that, boundaries are a thing. We have autonomy over our body and our space, and that there's so many different kinds of boundaries. And I feel really grateful to be having this conversation with you right now. And it does also feel raw in some ways because there's a lot present here. And I don't think that the work ever stops. Like boundary work and then healing from boundary violations is kind of like continually ongoing. And I will say that, unfortunately, the boundary violations that happened for me when I was quite young and moving up on through my life, a lot of times involved family members. And so I think that adds another layer that's really heavy and important to talk about. So, yeah, I want to honor the pain or the violations that we both have been through, and all the violations that everyone has been through with boundaries in the world, because it's big. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that last piece too. You actually probably have a lot more specific background and data on this than I do, but I remember one of my coaches or mentors telling me at one point about, basically he was talking about, there's this movement of, really bringing to light these sexual abuse cases. And, just recently we saw the verdict came through on the Ghislaine Maxwell case. And, fortunately she was found guilty on almost every count. And, I think that's a small but important victory for victims everywhere who have experienced these atrocious violations of their human rights and boundaries and their bodily autonomy. And what my coach and mentor was saying was, he's like, yes, let's look at these types of cases and remember that most abuse happens with someone that person knows. Like it's a family or a friend or a neighbor. It's not this thing that's just out there and there's these like big evil people doing this. Like, yes, that is happening. Yes, there are these, sex trafficking rings and all of that is real. And, it's happening in our communities. It's happening within the people that we know. And that's something that I think is still probably not talked about as much, because there does bring a whole new dimension of sensitivity to the topic of, I'm sure a number of things that you could probably speak to a lot better than I can, of like fear of retribution or, whatever number of factors there are there. So I just wanted to take a moment to, honor that and honor your bravery and even sharing that, because I don't think that's an easy thing to do. And I believe that it is helpful and healing, even if just one person hears that, maybe that gives them a little bit more validation and courage to pursue a deeper healing path for themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree, and I will share or say, recently I was having a conversation with someone about some of this and some of the painful experiences I went through when I was younger around boundary violations. And, I think when we look at horrible or sad or traumatic or atrocious things that have happened in our lives, the path of healing can look different and take different shapes. And this person kind of was posing a question of like, you could go this route or you could go this route, and kind of compartmentalize and be in a space where maybe you aren't talking about these things or going into this. But for me, it feels really relevant and really healing and cathartic to talk about it. And I do believe that it's part of my path and part of my purpose. And it does feel like a big, scary thing sometimes to dive into. But I'm extremely passionate about it. And it's like something that I will, a cause that I will fight for and take a stand on. And there's so much shame around it. And there's just so much kind of soaked in our culture of this culture of silence around it, because it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. But the reality is that it does happen a lot, and there's a lot of things to be done about it in systemic ways to try to help it. And I think just talking about it sheds light on it. So it's necessary. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm excited to dive in. And yeah, it's been a year because a lot of this has come up more freshly this year. So yeah, kind of pause there.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for someone like you who is willing to speak out on this. I know in my life certain pieces of my healing path didn't even become available for me to explore until I heard somebody else talk about it. And so I just want to really highlight and not underestimate the power of, like you said, just simply sharing about your experience. Simply sharing about your experience and how powerful that is, and having a safe space to do that. I mean, obviously we're here on a podcast right now that anyone could pop in and listen to, but it's one thing that I would love to see more of in the world is for every human to have more safe spaces to share whatever it is that's coming up. Because I feel like that's just a totally underserved human need that we all need, because every person has been through some type of trauma or experience, and some people a lot more so than others, and some around topics that are a lot more challenging to just talk about. And so that's like one prayer that I'm putting into 2022 is really that more spaces are created, and the people who are ready for them are drawn to those spaces to be able to share challenging experiences they've had in their lives, and how hard that is to keep all of that inside. And it just festers. It just almost just gets worse over time when someone doesn't have a space to share that. And I feel like there's just so many people right now who have nobody, not even one person who they can safely share certain things with, because maybe their guardians are actually also their violators. And that makes it very challenging to it's not a safe space to share. So I appreciate the work that you continue to do, and just your willingness to share. One other thing I wanted to share that has actually come up for me very recently is I've been becoming aware that it's very likely that there's actually some kind of experience or experiences I had when I was very young related to sexual abuse, which was not even in my awareness until literally this year. I had a session with a really powerful psychic and energy healer the other week, and she could even see that, and named a couple specific ages when I was really young, when certain events had happened. She couldn't even peer beyond that at that time because, apparently I'm just not ready to fully receive that information. But when she spoke to it, it had already kind of been coming up for me. It had already been kind of like arrows pointing towards something happening when I was very young. Like I said, it's not even been in my awareness, but I can see the effects of it. It's almost like I'm getting more and more clear on like my energy and how I show up, and specifically what my path around sexuality has been and how suppressed I felt most of my life. And like it all kind of points back to there was probably something happened when I was very young that I blocked out because it was just too much or something. So it's made me even more deeply just reverent towards everyone's experience around their sexuality and just, growing up in this world. Like, it's like I have no idea what someone has been through and why they are the way they are and how something might have affected them. Even just one experience on one day could change the course and direction of someone's whole life. I'm not even aware of my own experiences, so it's like I can only imagine like what other people's experiences might be. So it's really just brought me to this space of just even deeper humility and reverence towards other humans' experiences. And it's kind of allowed me to show up even more so from that space of, you never know what's going on in someone else's life. So just like treat everybody with kindness, treat everybody with respect, because you never know.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry to hear that. And it's really, it's heavy, and I can relate. Unfortunately, I'll kind of say like a few pieces, I guess, or things that came up. So you were talking just now, or thoughts that it sparked, and that I guess kind of first of all is that I agree and put that prayer and intention into 2022 to create more healing spaces for individuals to talk about their experiences in this life, regardless of what those might be, specifically around traumas that they've experienced. And I think, just kind of intuitively and from a balancing the scales, if you will, perspective, it makes sense to me why and how speaking on these things is really cathartic and healing, and it serves a greater purpose of raising the collective's awareness around these topics and bringing healing and shedding light on them, and also for people who are survivors, who are victims of these things, survivors, and I like to use the word thriver because I like that even better than survivor, because I'm like, when I look at some of the experiences I've had in my life, I'm like, wow, not only did I survive, I'm thriving, if you use this tapestry to compare against some of the experiences that I've had in my life. So yeah, I share that intention deeply, and think it's just really powerful, giving voice to things. And I one thing that is really, this is kind of a branch or a segment, but it's been part of my healing journey, is that it came into my awareness probably a couple of years ago that I was sexually abused as well when I was young, very young, and came into my awareness, heart, mind, spirit, and addressed that, and had brought it up to some individuals within my family system. And I shouldn't be like jaded about this, but like, shocker, it wasn't necessarily received well. And so a lot of times when people do bring these things up, they're gaslit, or they're questioned, or they're it's not easy to bring these things into the light. And there's a lot of sometimes investment in the people that it might be brought into their awareness of like, no, of course that didn't happen, kind of thing. And so the psychological violations of boundaries, I think is a lot of times it's just as important to talk about, and it interweaves with other boundary violations. So there's that piece, and that's kind of a really big topic. There's lots of rabbit holes we could go into with that and nuances there, but it feels relevant to mention that. And just also honoring both you and I's process and everyone's process who's experienced these boundary violations, like trusting that things come into our awareness when they're meant to, and when we're ready to look at them or heal them or step into awareness around them. And in my healing journey, I will say I've gotten to a place of, not always, easier said than done, but try to stay in a place of surrender and also gratitude for my kind of higher self's vision of the situation, and realizing like, wow, things came and come into my awareness around what some of these earlier traumas were when I'm ready, like when my mind, when my heart, when my spirit, when my soul has the bandwidth to process them, and not a minute earlier, not a minute later. So there's some kind of like divine beauty in that. You know, that might be a strange thing to say, with juxtaposed with the horrors of these of boundary violations and of childhood sexual abuse. That's but seeing that kind of, and having gratitude for that. So yeah, I'll pause there.
I really love this image that you just described of, at least how I took it, was you kind of like working in tandem with your higher self, being kind of like your guardian. And this conversation is bringing up a lot for me around, and even just this word guardian has been coming up for me a lot lately. And there's many layers of it, right? Of like our parents typically legally are seen as they're our legal guardians, right? Or you could have another appointed legal guardian. And yet we are also our own guardians. And then also there's the images of, the guardians of the galaxy coming up too. And it's like, the guardian, the protector, that archetype has really been coming up strong for me lately. And I've been really feeling the call to step into being a guardian more and more fully. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And I think for me, it really starts with, and why I reflected back about what you were just describing, is like being a guardian of myself, being a guardian and protector of my own energy, my own body, my own boundaries. Because as much as I would like to think that other people can protect me, they can to a degree. At the end of the day, I'm actually the only one I can truly rely on, and that I'll actually be around for sure. And that's kind of a challenging thing to sit with at first, to know that like, wow, like no one else can actually provide me like true safety. I'm actually the only one who can do that. And me in communion with my higher self and with God, with life, with the universe, that's really, if I had to guess, the only place that true safety could lie. And I think there's a lot to that. It's much simpler said than done. But for me, the more that I lean into that consideration of truth, the more safe and relaxed I actually feel. And the more that I open to the idea that there actually is like a higher self, a version of me that is working in tandem with God, with the benevolent orchestrating force of the universe. That actually is a really solid connection. The more that I lean into that, and it's been really teaching me a lot on how to be a better guardian and protector of myself, of my energy. And that for me has been a really healing experience, because I think for most of my growing up years, I in many cases was looking outside of myself for someone to protect me. And I think that often fell short for two reasons. One, people didn't have good intentions, or they had very limited capacity on how they could actually protect me or be a guardian of me. And I have had some great guardians over the years that I want to acknowledge. You know, my parents, fortunately, in this life have been really great guardians and protectors for me. I'm very fortunate because I know a lot of people don't necessarily have that. But that is one blessing that I've had in this life, is to have really strong guardians with my parents, and they have their limitations and they can only do so much, see so much for me, protect me so much from the world. I had to go out and put myself in a lot of challenging situations because, you know, being overly protective by an outside force can actually also be limiting as well. So this whole topic around guardianship, I think, is really fascinating to me, and has been a lens I've been trying on that's helped me to provide greater safety for my body, even just like touching different parts of my body and being like, I got you, like I'm here for you, like I'm not going to let anything happen to you, and I'm so sorry for the harm and abuse you've experienced in the past, and like I'm here to put a stop to that. And that's been one of the most powerful practices that I've developed for myself lately, is really just constantly reminding my body that like I'm here for you, I got you, and I'm going to do everything that I can to help you to feel safe, to help you to heal, to help you to strengthen. You know, if nobody else has you, like I've got you. And if I haven't been there for you in the past, like I'm here for you now. And I'm here to make up for that, for all the times that I haven't protected you, that I haven't been here for you, you know, even if it was because I just didn't know how, or I didn't have the capacity. It's like I'm here to develop a greater capacity.
Thank you for that. That's powerful. I really love that visual, that image, and that concept. And I think I have been reflecting on that topic as well. And I think, you know, I will say that, yeah, just what does it mean to be a guardian to ourselves and to others? And I think I'll speak to my experience, which is that there were other people as well in my life when I was younger who were in the path of harm. And I think there was sort of a complex that I had of, I have to be the protector for myself and other individuals. And since I was very young, and while I understand that and I understand the psychology of that, they're kind of, for me now in my life, with the juncture that I'm at with my own healing, I have to continually remind myself, like, you cannot fill others' cups until you fill your own. And you cannot be rushing in, kind of like if you imagine, like, you know, a chaotic thing, or like an ambulance or a crime scene, just as an analogy, and rushing in and trying to help this other person when you are not in a space to be able to do that, and you haven't checked on yourself, and you haven't checked on your own body and your own emotions and your own strength of energy or just anything around that. And it can be kind of a trap to have this feeling of, oh, I need to do this work or step into this for ... for these other people. And it's like, actually, we have to do everything for ourselves. We have to protect ourselves. We have to work on boundaries and healing within ourselves. And by doing that, then we are in turn helping others. And we are going to be showing up from a space of centeredness, groundedness, and the word sovereignty just kept coming into mind when you're talking about that just now, and touching on what that means to be sovereign and recognizing like we are all radically responsible and accountable for our own safety. And we all have our higher selves and the relationship with our higher selves, the higher power with God. Whatever people's belief systems are around that. And, there's kind of that. And then there is the space of like, yes, what does it mean to be a guardian over a younger person, or a guardian over a child, or a guardian over someone else? And there's such a great, huge responsibility with that, and people have made comments or things in the past of like, oh, you should have to, do X, Y, Z to become a parent, or have to go through this training, or have to do this to become a parent. And part of me can like bristle at that and say like, oh, well, no, that's like taking away freedom of choice of an individual to have a child. But as strongly as I feel about protecting children and advocating for them, like I kind of agree with that in a way. Like, yeah, there should be some kind of thing you have to do before you bring another life into this world. And I think if that were to be like anything hypothetically, it would be like a class on boundaries, and a class on understanding what boundaries are, how they're created, how important they are, and how we can't have them in certain areas unless we've developed like a rudimentary foundation of what they are, and like where I end and where you begin, essentially. So I really love that, and it's a process. I want to keep bringing my higher self in to check on myself. It's something I don't do often enough. I'm working on it. It's a process. Baby steps are better than big leaps sometimes, and yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And that's powerful. This concept of the guardian, our own guardianship over ourselves.
I'm really loving these deep breaths.
Me too. They feel so good.
Yeah, I just want to briefly touch on a couple of things that you just shared that really brought up some energy for me. And then I think I actually want to transition to a slightly different topic. I really love what you were sharing about focusing on yourself first and your own healing. I'm more and more of a believer that unless I'm coming from a place of wholeness, I only have so much I can offer, and most of the time feels almost like a waste of my efforts. If I'm not truly healed to a certain degree, I think there's always more layers, and I think there is something to like, you can be relatively healed around something. You can be relatively competent around something. And more and more, I just try to show up from the places where I know I can actually show up from a place of true benefit because I've actually done that work in myself, and I've come to a certain place of completion, at least with that piece, that I actually have something to offer from a genuine healed place. It's like that phrase, problems can't be solved from the level of consciousness they were created. I think it was Einstein or someone like that who said that, maybe misquoting there, but
I love it.
yeah, I've really been feeling that a lot more lately, and it really, I just notice where the places I'm coming to within myself lately, and noticing that, I've been on a path of deep healing and transformation really consciously since my freshman year of high school about 17 years ago. And I have reached certain levels of like I'm healed. And there's other pieces that, of course, I'm still healing, but more and more the people that I'm meeting, there's actually a lot of humans I'm meeting lately who are getting to a certain place of healed within themselves, that they're actually prepared to serve in a greater capacity and from a place of wholeness. And basically, anyone I have on this podcast typically is coming from that place in their own way. And, that I kind of want to use that to transition to the topic of, what's unfolding right now. It's the last day of 2021, getting ready to step into the new year, leaving 2021 behind, stepping into 2022. It's been a wild ride the last couple of years. We'll be coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the pandemic, and the first shutdowns happening, coming up this March. And I've just been doing a lot of reflecting lately on what does that mean and what's unfolding presently as we're recording this. The next wave of the virus is spreading pretty rapidly. I think they said about 2 to 3 times more rapidly than previous variants. But the other interesting fact that's paired with that is that it seems to be significantly less severe in terms of hospitalizations. I think there's one statistic I read, it's like 80% less hospitalizations. So it does seem to be spreading a lot more, but it seems like that it's not hitting as hard this time, fortunately. And so just like when I feel into the energy of that and what's going on right now, like the hit I get, and I could be totally wrong and off my rocker, but the intuitive information I've been receiving as I've just am coming out the tail end. This is day 10 of when I first started experiencing symptoms, the first time I had caught the virus. And, I haven't been vaccinated, and I trusted my body's ability to handle it, and that was not the right choice for me. And, it was uncomfortable for a couple of days, but I fortunately got some ivermectin and some other supplements and just a lot of rest and hydration and just taking care of myself, and moved through the worst of it in 2 or 3 days. And then the last week has been, as I was describing before we jumped on here, just kind of a slow healing process where each day it was like new layers were coming to the surface, to be seen, to be witnessed, to be felt, and to be released ultimately. And in this last week has actually felt a lot more connected to the collective healing experience that's happening right now for me than, I'm sure there's personal pieces tied to it, and I keep having personal pieces come up. And yet I feel like I'm more and more in tune with the collective energy right now, especially I think with so many people experiencing it. It almost feels like I have like a psychic connection to everyone through this virus. I don't know, maybe that sounds weird to say, but like I just feel in tune because there's this collective human experience happening. And I just so understand now that I am one cell within a body. Like I am a cell within the body of humanity. And quantumly, I am connected to every other cell in the body. And to some degree, I can perceive and have an awareness of what's going on in the rest of the body. It's like I have the individual health of my cell, and there's like a collective health of the body. And, you know, I'm doing everything I can to continue rising, you know, my health meter of my individual cell so I can be of greater service to the cells around me, and continuing to increase that. And I can sense where the collective health meter is at. And I actually feel really good about where we're headed, even despite this current, you know, outbreak. More and more, I'm actually shifting my perspective on what is disease and what is a virus and what is actually happening. And again, anyone listening, you can feel free to think I'm crazy or wrong or whatever, bring counter evidence. But like, you know, just this is a perspective that's been helpful for me and has actually brought me a lot greater peace, which is that sickness is actually not necessarily something we like catch a lot of the time. Like maybe there are certain cases where it's a little more, you know, blunt, just like, you know, you might have a blunt trauma, like an injury where you like fall and you hurt your knee or something like that. But I think in terms of like the bigger picture, like what I've been getting is that sickness is actually something that already has been living inside of us. It's already these patterns and frequencies and beliefs and messages and traumas, like it's already living within us. And it's actually just like being activated and coming up to the surface. And there's like a certain breaking point we hit, and then it's able to actually like be seen or felt or released. And coming out the other side of that, we actually have the opportunity for our body to be cleansed and healed and actually let go of distorted frequencies that have been living within our body. And that's really what this last week has been for me. Actually continue feeling better and better as I honor my process and not fight it or think there's actually anything bad or wrong going on, but it's actually like a really good thing. And that's more what I'm feeling on this variant as well, especially that we've, I think, kind of gotten through the worst first couple of variants where there was just a lot of gunk coming up for everyone, which I think can be very challenging and life-threatening when it's just like all this deep collective stuff has been coming to the surface that can literally send someone to the hospital because they don't have the capacity to hold all of that. And the individual health of their cell may not be so great that, you know, it might be difficult to handle. But I think now what's happening, how I view it is that, cool, like collectively we're actually have built a lot better capacity to handle what's coming up, and we can actually just like be with that more, and we can actually make even swifter healing progress, as long as we're just like present with it and do what we actually need to do to take care of our bodies and our health, and we're open to the alternative solutions that, you know, are a lot more effective with less negative side effects to them. So that's just like a quick synopsis of some very fresh things coming up for me lately, some very fresh like internal intel that's been coming up for me lately around kind of this collective healing that's happening right now, this collective, I don't even like using the words like disease and sickness as much anymore because I don't want to feed those never-ending cycles of undesirable reality. I think it's important to acknowledge distortions and you know, things that are happening in the body. And more lately, I'm like, how do we actually invest in health? How do we actually invest in our healing and growth and transformation and like further embodiment of actually becoming the human species that we want to become? And again, anyone is welcome to disagree with that or think that, I'm wrong in how I'm viewing things. But I feel such a call to just offer alternative perspectives on viewing things that might be helpful to certain people. Yeah. And to clarify, I am actually a big supporter of true science that is properly applied and understood within larger and larger contexts.
Yeah.
I actually worked in a research lab for my honors thesis in college, so I'm actually very aware of the scientific process and the value as well as the limitations of that, namely how narrow a scientific study usually has to be in order to get any type of meaningful results, that oftentimes things are so taken out of context that they're not even appropriately applied, or there's just a much larger context that we get so in a rabbit hole of studying something based on certain foundational assumptions that we're actually missing the real solution because it's not even within the realm of what's being studied. And that's how I feel about this whole larger paradigm around disease. Is like we are studying disease and we are fighting against disease. We're not actually studying health and investing into health. We're literally investing in disease. And as brilliant as minds I'm sure we have working on things like vaccines and everything, more and more I feel like I'm just curious, like I wonder if those very refined skill sets that these humans have developed could actually be applied in a different way that could be much more supportive of actually moving the needle forward on becoming a healthier society. I know that was a lot, so feel free to pick up anywhere you want to. Okay. There's a lot there.
There is so much there.
Like I just opened up Pandora's box.
No,
sorry.
I'm like, where am I going to dive into the deep end, man? No, it's great. Thank you. I think. So Wow. Yeah. Where to start? There's a lot there. And thank you for sharing all of that. And I will kind of just bounce in or jump in with what feels relevant or kind of some pieces that I'll share, which is that there's a couple things. Number one, I don't fully understand COVID. I don't think anybody does fully.
Same.
Right?
I'm just making my best guesses here.
I think we can say that there's things we do understand in life, there's things we don't understand, and there's things that we don't have the capacity to even be able to understand. And I think this is it's been going on for, like you said, about 2 years now, and there's a lot there. I do believe that humanity is ascending right now and evolving, and there is an evolving process that is underway in human consciousness and where you kind of alluded, where humanity is going. And I feel like COVID, in a way, has been a catalyst for a lot of change, a lot of introspection for people, a lot of analyzing what's working and what's not working in their life, a lot of looking at how our society in so many ways is designed around doing and not being, and this kind of call to slow down. And one friend of mine who is a guide and a mentor had a conversation with them this year about it, and their thoughts on it was basically that they said getting the virus was one of the greatest blessings that happened to them because they had really a different perspective on a lot of stuff on the other side of it. And that really what it is just a call to slow down. And I think that there's so much push back against that in our society in a lot of different ways and a lot of different agendas for why people might not want that to happen. And I over the last few weeks, I'm just going to jump to the piece that you said about tapping into the collective's energy, because over the last few weeks, I've been in an interesting space of not feeling 100% energetically, but not also necessarily feeling sick, and having a few things that are so subtle that I'm like, is this a symptom? Do I have COVID? And then I had gotten a test about 5 days ago and it was negative. And as this whole thing has progressed, I've really continued to try to come into a space of checking in with myself, checking in with my body, checking in with my intuition, and asking, like, what's going on right now? Is it safe for me to be around other humans? Do I need to stay home today? And I think at the end of the day, we all have the ability to do that. We all are able to check in with our bodies and check in with our intuition and check in with what's real and what's present for us and what's coming up. And that might look different than the messages that we're told from the outside, from external sources, whoever and wherever they may be. And I believe every human has the ability to check in with themselves around that, and it's not really that disconnected from what we were talking about earlier around boundaries and sovereignty and guardianship over ourselves, and that feeling of like sensing maybe when our boundaries have been crossed. That similar mechanism for checking in with that within ourselves, I think, also has to do with COVID in some ways. And I was talking with another friend, this is just another tangent, but last night actually, and the conversation came up, and this friend said, COVID is really just a collective test and exercise around empathy and sensitivity. And I thought that was really, really fascinating and felt really relevant. So there's one more piece I guess I'll tie into in how I'm relating to how I've been feeling over the past few weeks is I feel like I haven't necessarily gotten the virus, but I've been skirting around it in the sense that I've been tapping into the collective's energy around it. And we're not very comfortable with death as a society. We don't talk about death that often, or if we do, it's sort of like you're reading a picture book and you're flipping through all the pictures, and then you get to the page that says like the end or death, and it's sort of like, and it's like everyone pauses and it's like, whoa. And I think that we are getting more comfortable with it, right? There's been death and loss over the last several years, and there's been this kind of collective energy of like, in order for things to be birthed and for new things to come in, things do have to leave. And it's just something that I kind of want to use the term you use, because I really like that, move the needle forward on collectively as a society getting to a place where we're more comfortable talking about that and looking at why we're so uncomfortable with certain pieces of the cycle and endings, and our relationship to fear and to fear of death, and like taking accountability over our health and our life to the fullest. Feels like we can't necessarily go there until we've gone into a space of healing or looking at our relationship with death. And and grief. I feel like COVID also ties into a lot of things around grieving, and I feel like we are moving, so much is changing in our world and our society right now, and there's been a lot of death, there's been loss, there's been a lot of trauma that we've all suffered collectively, and we are sort of like, whoa, we don't, like, what do we do with all this trauma and all this grief? And it gets overwhelming. So to speak to like what you said about sickness coming out in the body, I do believe like that resonates, what you said, 100%. Like, it's not so much, it's more like it's always been there, and it's these things coming out when they come out because they need to be cleansed, healed and worked through. And one more piece that I'll touch on that I feel really passionately about and has continued to feel relevant, I guess, for me with COVID or with the way some things have played out in this pandemic is that I think the conversation around the vaccine and whether someone's made the choice to be vaccinated or not is a personal choice, and it's a health choice. And I think there's kind of an interesting turning point that happened where there became a lot of, I want to say, value or moral value associated with like stating to people that you have or have not gotten the vaccine. And I think we can perhaps all slightly agree that it's been politicized, which is unfortunate. And it's also become very divisive. And I stand by strongly the viewpoint or the feeling of like whatever choice someone wants to make is fine, and that's up to them, and that's the point. It's their choice. They get to make that choice. And whether or not they share with folks what choice they've made on a personal health decision is not really any different than telling someone whether you've ever been pregnant before or whether you've ever had an abortion or how you feel about XYZ or what kind of pharmaceuticals or herbal supplements you might be taking for a mental disorder you have. Those are all things that are personal, not like like what's the agenda of making it public, I guess. So I think there's relevancy in that. And like you said, I would say to anyone on this podcast, you might be hearing what we're saying and be like, nope, this is hogwash. I disagree. And that's fine and that's okay. And I think that we are all going through this collectively, and we're also not all experiencing it the same and have not all had the same experience with this and do not all have the same feelings of what some of the deeper nuances are going on with COVID. And that's maybe an unsettling or like dark or kind of heavy or might feel strange or odd to say that or to sit with that. But yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing in the piece around grief and this collective grieving we're going through, and also the piece around death and us being such a death-averse culture, at least over here in the U.S. It's not the same in other countries, other parts of the world. It is interesting how we are so... There's so many paradoxes here, right? Like we're so death averse, and yet we're also like one of the most unhealthy societies. Like we're not even living fully in terms of like our health. So that's an interesting paradox to look at, contradiction. And we're so grasping and clinging. Like I get such a grasping, clinging energy when I really feel into our society, our culture here. And we're so living in the future and in the past a lot more than actually in the present. And one example, one kind of maybe strange example I want to bring in that is just coming up, and I feel like there's something interesting here, which is in our society, when you work a job, like you from a young age start putting away towards your retirement, right? Like you put money in a retirement account that you actually can't even touch until you're 65 or something. I find that interesting. And then finally, when we get to the age of 65, at least a majority of the people in our society, we're already so worn down and beat up and like in such bad health that at that point, you know, that money is just basically used to help us try and maintain some type of like relative quality of life. But definitely I don't think most people would consider themselves thriving at that point. I just like just as a thought exercise, what if, and this is literally what I'm doing in my life, and people feel free to judge me and my choice to use my finances in such a way, but like I actually don't feel called to invest in any type of retirement accounts right now. And yeah, a lot of like our typical financial advice would be that's a very poor decision, right? That's not a smart thing to do. But what I'm actually doing with that money instead is I'm taking that and I'm investing that into my health and well-being right now. I'm actually investing in the things that will over time continue to build a more and more robust health in all ways. And as I continue to improve like the overall health and well-being of just my beingness, I will continue to rise in my ability to provide value to others and be provided for in any ways that I need to. So I'm actually not worried about retirement. My retirement plan is to continue to become the best version of myself, to continue to refine my skills and my crafts, to continue to improve my health so I have a lot more excess and abundance to give on any day. And I can actually be of greater service to the society and provide more and more value to the society, which in turn will provide value back to me in the ways that I need to. What if instead of putting all these resources that are kind of just stale resources, right? They're just that are sitting in someone's account for 30 plus years, 40 years, doing nothing actually in this world until we get to the point of being able to access those funds, which I think that whole system is breaking down very quickly from what I understand. It's like it just seems so weird to me that why would you like I understand the principles behind it, but I think it also is just like a window into how our society functions and what our relationship is with our resources, with our health, with our bodies, and how we're just like putting it off in the future. Meanwhile, doing all the things that wear our body down over time, when we know how possible it is to be 60, 70 years old and thriving, like we have the examples. I see it all the time at my brother's races. You have these 70-year-old guys out there running 100-mile races regularly, and they're happy, and they're healthy, and they're thriving. And I think just enough people don't even realize that's possible. So I just wanted to present that example just because I feel like the energetic of that, I think, gives a valuable perspective on more and more how I'm shifting my views on our society, and it's making me question, how are we investing our resources personally and collectively? And I like playing things out till their end, and this will be kind of my last example, and I'd love to hear what's coming up for you. But, on the vaccine thing, just to address it, it's like, I understand at least the basics of what a vaccine is and what it's meant for. I understand, the science behind it. I understand how amazing some of the developments have been to develop something like an mRNA vaccine. Like, I understand all of that. And if we keep playing this out over the course of 10 more years, and that is where we're investing such a huge amount of resources, is that actually going to get us to where we want to go? And my gut feeling very, very clearly is no. Like our ladder is up against the wrong wall. We're investing our resources, no matter how well-intentioned they are, into a vehicle that's never going to take us to our destination. And that to me is really how I feel at this point. Like, so much respect to however anybody views that whole situation, whatever personal choices people make for themselves. I don't know what's right for you in this moment for the short run or for the long term. And I know for me and for more and more of the people I most trust, admire, and respect, there is a call right now to make a shift in where we're investing ourselves. Where are we investing our resources, our time, attention, energy, health, money, connections? Like where are we investing ourselves? And is that, if we're honest with ourselves, actually getting us to a place we want to go to? But I think the piece that probably if I had to try to name the biggest disconnect that I can see in this moment, is there is not enough people who actually believe in a society that is fundamentally different than the one that we've been living in for literally centuries. I think that is the biggest missing piece I can see right now for us to actually make this shift more swiftly. There's not enough people who actually believe that our society, our species can function in a way that is wholly benevolent and good and supportive and helpful and happy and healthy, that literally that could be a possibility for every single human being on the planet. There are not enough people who believe that that's possible. There's actually relatively very few people who I think truly believe that and see that and feel that. And I think for better or worse, and I'm not a very black and white person, but I think unless we get more and more people to believe in a possibility like that, we're actually not going to make the decisions collectively that's actually going to get us there. Right? We can't, you know? If all you believe is that we're just going to more or less keep just swirling around in the same kind of half-fulfilling society, like that's all that's ever going to happen. And all the choices we make, you know, from a short, narrow perspective seemingly make sense, but it's not going to get us anywhere different, not anywhere fundamentally different, and not in any type of significant way, unless we actually believe in a totally different operation of how society can function. And I am fully a believer that we are in an evolution, a major evolution. We're going through a narrow passage right now. And you know, I'm pouring all my resources into that there isn't a miscarriage, you know, that we can actually fully get through this birth canal as we're rebirthing as a society. But you have to believe in what's on the other side. And if we don't believe in that, we're going to just stay trapped and get stuck and swirl ourselves around until all of our resources are spent and we have nothing left to spend. So yeah, that's just to drop in some more energetic pieces of what's been coming up for me lately.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's I'm like, where to go with that? Because man, touched on so many incredible things there, and so much that I agree with and relate to. And I think I'll just kind of where do we even go? Yeah, so I'll actually back it up and speak about finances, which is an interesting topic for me. That's a juicy one. Been doing a lot of shadow work around finances this year, really looking at a lot of patterns in my life, looking at relationships I've had with money, looking at what money means to me, what it energetically symbolizes, attachments, traumas, stories, narratives, understanding why I've made some of the choices and patterns in my life around it. And I don't either have a retirement account. I'm not currently in a 9-to-5 type position or in a job where that is offered. That's something that I could have. I realize there's other choices I could make to set that up for myself. But I mean, I agree with you. It's always kind of seemed really strange to me. I've kind of always been like, why would you do that? Not in a sense of thinking like, oh, it's bad to provide for your future self and to take care of your future self and have money set aside so that you can live. The world is in a really interesting place right now. There's a lot of evolving happening. There's a lot of shifting happening. Financial landscapes are happening. Cryptocurrency is a thing. It's been a thing for several years, but I feel like it's going to be more of a thing, and it is becoming more of a thing rapidly. It's just the landscape of what things are going to look like financially. I feel like in like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and down the road, like, we don't know. Like, financial investors and people who study the market and these things like could, make assumptions and make guesses that feel more, that are definitely better educated than what my predictions or beliefs might be. But it hasn't. There's a piece of me that struggles with future planning financially, and I understand part of that has to do with past traumas and narratives that I hold around money. And I would say some of my abuse in my earlier years was around finances and being financially manipulated. And I understand that. That's really deep, and that's a whole other rabbit hole. But there's this other part of me that's just not really ever wanted to like buy into this concept of like, we need to build an infrastructure for ourselves for the future, because we don't know what the future is going to look like. It's important to believe in a future, and a part of me has always believed in a future where we are coming together as a collective way more. And a part of me has never liked capitalism and always thought that it's just absolute trash, because it involves sacrificing human bodies and health at the cost of money and greed and productivity. And that's not saying that all of me hates capitalism and that I don't see that it has some benefits. Like, no, I'm not going to make black and white statements about this kind of thing. But I am going to now kind of jump to the piece that you were saying about enough of us don't believe yet that we can create a future where we are all interdependent on each other and we are all completely free and completely healthy and sovereign and operating from a place of deep connection and humanity and sustainability and oneness with the earth. Like, I think there are a lot of us that do believe that is possible and feel and know in our hearts it's somewhere we're heading there. It's happening. And a lot of people like don't feel that or see that or believe that. And to kind of go full circle, and it just might sound dark, but to come back to that death energy, that I do believe there are people and souls that are leaving this plane right now, and we all have a time. We don't know when our time's going to be, and coming from a space of living in fear or in trying to guess what things are going to look like, rather than really rooting and being invested in the present moment and what's relevant and how we can be making connections and coming from a space of living in the heart and believing in humanity and believing in the power of connection. I think that's a really big thing. And that kind of goes full circle and jumps back around to COVID and this pandemic, and looking at and the fact that we've been not able to connect physically with each other as much these past several years as an entire globe and in human world, and just the effects that that's had, and like how much we need connection. Like, we are so deeply wired for social connection. And so I think that it's not a mistake and maybe ironic, but happening for a reason, that this pandemic is going on coinciding with this sort of evolution in human consciousness and creating a different kind of world in future. We have to all go inward and like just continue to examine our own connection with ourselves and connecting with others. Like, what is our relationship to connecting with others? Like, are we allowing ourselves to show up in like the deepest like vulnerability and authenticity and closeness when we connect with others? And that doesn't mean that has to happen like in the physical, but like it's ideal for it to happen in the physical. Like that's so yeah, I'll kind of stop there. I know that's kind of vague and like big topics that I'm just throwing around, but kind of that's thoughts that came up with all that you're saying. And also I'll just speak and say like I really admire the thoughtfulness that you have put into and the intentions of saying, okay, I could be putting this money into a retirement account, but it makes so much more sense and resonates so much more for me to be putting that money or those resources into my health now, because my body is my retirement account. My human vessel on this lifetime is my, you know what I mean? So I just love that. And I think that's kind of getting the wheels turning for me around some investing in my own health in some new and deeper ways in the coming years. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll pause there.
Yeah. Yeah, to even take that piece one step further, it would actually feel irresponsible of me to take my money and not put as much of it as I can into like improving my own state and well-being in this moment, especially at such a crucial time we're all in right now. Like I want to be as supportive as I can possibly be to the collective. And in order to do that, I need my body to be as strong as possible now and healthy as possible, and to like continue doing my deep healing transformation work in as rapid of a pace as I can, to just like put that money in some account that I'm going to touch 30 years later actually seems very fear driven and very scarcity driven. And this, the caveat here, right, is like, you know, it actually doesn't feel good for me to be broke. Like I actually, you know, want to have enough of a cushion that I don't feel like it's negatively affecting my nervous system. You know, I think I'm a little less risk averse than a lot of people. So I'm like willing to ride that edge a bit more and to stretch myself. But that feels actually good to me in general. And I have a constant flow of funds coming through my life. And I'm just figuring out how to be the best steward of my resources in this moment and really be here and really be present and really be more in my body. And I wanted to touch on the other piece you were just talking about around connection and even like physical connection. Yeah, that's been a really interesting piece of this that I think has really maybe even given us all a basic training on boundaries. If that's like one perspective I could look at it, it's like through disconnection, we've actually learned, you know, when does it feel good or okay to be within someone's personal space? Like it's given us some type of basic energetic awareness of other people's beingness and their energy and their space. So I think despite whatever one's views are on mass and distancing and all of that, like it has, I think, brought in a very basic way, like awareness of other people's space. And I think that's actually could be a positive thing. And the other piece I want to bring in on that topic is this whole piece around virtual reality and the metaverse and all of that that's unfolding right now. I think that at least a lot of people I know and hang out with, when like, you know, Facebook announced Meta, there was generally a kind of negative reaction towards it. Because I think we could all kind of sense like it's going in this weird direction right now where we're becoming more disconnected from our human nature. We're like transferring more and more of our attention into this digital world that we're actually like, in a way that actually is like losing connection with our bodies, where it's like that image of like the person with the VR headset on who's like fat and eating junk food, and they're sitting in their, living room on their couch, and their place is a pigsty, like, but they're in the VR world, they're this like rock star, blah, blah, blah. But it's like there's just such a disconnect, right? And so another one of my prayers for 2022 is actually that as we continue, because I don't think technology development is going to stop. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to even consider. So assuming that technology is going to continue to do its thing and advance at a more and more rapid pace, and AI is going to evolve, and VR is going to evolve, and AR, my prayer is that we actually leverage technology and our relationship with it in such a way that we actually become more embodied, that we use it to enhance our human experience in our bodies, because I actually believe that our bodies are the most advanced piece of technology that we have. Like literally, none of this would exist without human bodies existing first. I always bring myself back to that. It's like this microphone would not exist without this flesh and bones human body. Like this is literally the vessel that builds skyscrapers and rocket ships and microphones, is literally this body. Like it has to be greater than any technology we can come up with. And I think is only going to become a more and more profound advanced technology. I think our bodies are extremely advanced, and we're only just beginning to understand what their capabilities are. And we don't even do anything close to justice to honoring and acknowledging what they can do now. Like literally our hands have built skyscrapers and spaceships that can go to Mars and the moon. Like it's wild, and these advanced medical technologies. It's like those are brilliant innovations. Those are brilliant technologies that were built by human hands. And, where is that leading us? Like, are we actually using our power of the gods in such a way that will support our continued evolution, or are we off track in some way? Yeah. So prayer for deeper embodiment in 2022, and building a relationship with our technology and with each other in a way where we really value human connection and going deeper within our bodies and increasing our capacity for the human experience. Like that, I think, could be a really unifying intention and focus if more and more people could really choose that.
I love that. Yes, I echo that. I echo that prayer and that intention for 2022. And I'll kind of just, throw in some astrology into the mix, kind of throw a curveball in.
Yeah.
But so one thing that happened recently, it was just a few days ago actually, but the planet Jupiter entered the sign of Pisces, and Pisces has to do with the spiritual realm and our intuition and our psychic abilities. And Jupiter is the planet of kind of abundance and success and driving forward. So I think that kind of speaks, that's a side note about where human consciousness is going right now, and the evolution of our relationship with connection with each other, and also our evolution in consciousness and our own psychic abilities, intuition, embodied relationship with the parts of us that aren't just our skin, like deeper than that is kind of a piece. But we are also, depending on the astrologer you talk to, there's different people have different viewpoints on this, but we're in the age of Aquarius now, and it technically started last year. And a big theme collectively around that is our relationship with technology as a human collective, because you said and kind of hinted at and just stated actually like it's not going backwards. Our relationship with technology and how many advancements are happening in technology is only going to just continue to skyrocket and evolve, and there will be more. And it's powerful what we have with technology and all the things that we can do with it. And there's always been, questions of responsibility and due diligence and ethics when we have the use of technology in a powerful way. Like, what are we using it for? To what means and to what end? And there is kind of this large collective struggle and scenario that we have playing out right now that I think will continue to play out in 2022 and beyond, of like, are we using, like you said, technology to connect more with each other, or are we using it to take us completely away from human connection, from being in a space of feeling embodied with each other and with ourselves? And we'll see what happens, but I know the world that I want to be a part of and want to build and want to co-create with my higher self and co-create with God and co-create with other humans is a world that takes us way, way deeper into connecting with each other and going, back into a space of decades and centuries before, when like computers weren't a thing and cell phones weren't a thing, and we were connecting deeper with each other. I think there's hope for what that looks like, and I think there is going to be a conscious decision that every person, every soul is making on some level of like, what is their relationship with technology and what do they want it to look like and what do they want us to use technology for in the world. And I just encourage folks to like ask themselves that question. And it might sound like the smallest of things or the biggest of things, but like it can be something small, like how often do you check your phone every day, to something, big, like maybe you work in a company where your company or your job is developing a huge new, whatever it might be, machine or technology that's cutting edge, and encouraging people to like go into that and like do your due diligence and use your intuition and listen to your heart and your higher kind of self about like, where is this going to go? Where is this going to lead humanity? Like, where is this creating something that can open the door to more connection, or is this taking us down a path of less connection? And I think without sounding like too grim or grave, I think there are dire consequences of choosing the other path, because technology absolutely can kind of take over in some ways, and in some ways I would argue like already has in certain realms of or spheres of life, and just like getting honest with ourselves about like, okay, where do we want to go with that, or where I'll stop there, but that just kind of sprung up.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the potential dire consequences of basically just continuing down the path that we've been going down for a long time, and our recent I don't know, when I just look at our current relationship with technology and still like what it is in this moment overall, it does concern me about where we're headed. And I think as the technologies become more powerful and we, come closer and closer to whatever, AI is and the singularity and all of that, I think it's a choice point for humanity. I think it could go one of two ways. I think it could go down a very dystopian, destructive path, when we develop technology to the point where it can be recreating itself, which already is to a certain capacity, and it's becoming more and more autonomous. If we're not guiding that technology properly, it will bite back. It will, I think, ultimately be our demise. Yeah, not to be grim, but like I think that legitimately what will eventually happen if we continue down the current relationship we have with it. I think on the other end, if we can somehow infuse like these deep supportive core values into the technology we're creating, if we can somehow program in benevolence and guardianship and sovereignty like into our technology, if we can figure out how to do that, then I think that actually sets us up for a very bright future. And I think technology could actually be one of our greatest allies moving forward if we can really build the right relationship with it. Then it becomes not an enemy but an ally, and I truly believe in that. And the last piece I wanted to touch back on, because I think it's so important, there's so much there, and maybe it's kind of the last topic we can touch on a bit more before wrapping things up. But human connection is so important and so powerful, and I think human connection in and of itself is almost like a technology. Like when I get together with other resonant human beings, like there's just this magic that happens where all of a sudden, like, I'm elevated to like a higher version of myself than I've been before. And I think that's only going to become more and more of a thing as we move forward, as we all, I think there are a lot of more advanced beings on the planet right now. And I think that everybody's growth path is being accelerated right now. Every single human being's growth path is being accelerated. And we're all rising in our intelligence, in our compassion, in our empathy, in our ability to actually like be of service to the collective. And I think when resonant humans come together, there's this, greater than the sum of the parts thing that happens. And I'm experiencing that more and more myself. And I think that it's so important that we invest in human connection, which I think in the past has sometimes seemed like a frivolous thing, right? Or just like, oh, that's just like not that important. But I think it's only going to become more important that we be connected to our own bodies, with other people, and really I think ties it back to our original topic of boundaries and consent and communication and even intimacy. I think these are going to become really more and more important topics moving forward. I know for me in 2022, one new path I'm going to be exploring is actually going into temple space. I don't know how familiar you are. For those listening who are not familiar with that term, basically a temple space is a very intentionally created space that is typically centered around sacred sexuality and communication and just basically exploring deeper parts of the human connection, like starting with oneself, starting with one's relationship with one's own body, one's own energy, one's own sexuality, one's own sensuality, just like really learning to tune into one's senses more, learning to really be with one's own desire, to be with one's own energy, and both like your desire as well as like your limitations, your current limitations of like what your capacity is for human connection experience. And my intention with going through, having some more of these experiences is to become more trained in being able to create spaces for people to explore human connection in a way that's not super present right now. I think our options for exploring human connection in our society are very limited. Typically it's, go out to a bar and drink alcohol so you can let your inhibitions down enough to actually experience some type of human connection you desire. And I think it's just so unfortunate how specific of conditions are usually required for certain types of human connection, and also paired typically with, substances that for a lot of people can have negative effects. And that's not to be judgmental or to say that like alcohol in and of itself is a bad thing. I think I think people can have a healthy relationship with that thing. And I think overall that is a very abusive relationship for a lot of people, even if they're not willing to admit that or not able to notice that or just don't even see how they have a very limited context within which they can have certain social or human connection experiences. So, I just feel like the more that we're able to tap into our own connection with ourself and our body, and as well as with others, like that, I think is going to be part of the bigger solution of how do we move forward in such a way where we build a relationship with our technology, with our society, with our systems, with our structures that really value human experience. I think that's something that it's almost strange to me how much we don't put the human experience as like a top priority in how we live our lives and how we design things. It's almost like we're designing things more for the aesthetic or for the performative nature of things rather than for the actual, like, does this actually enhance the human experience? Is this actually creating a better experience for all involved? It almost blows my mind how much that's not a focus. Like, it's always somewhere in the mix, but it's usually not like one of the top priorities. There's, productivity or profitability or even just like beauty can be a higher priority than the total human experience. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts or feelings on the importance of human connection and the human experience and like how you see that playing out over the next year or just like moving forward. And there was like 10 routes I didn't even go that I want to go, like loneliness and like there's like so many different subtopics there, but I just would love to hear like whatever the most resonant things that are coming up for you.
Yeah. So wow, that was I love that. Thank you for sharing all that, and that all really like is making me think about a lot of different things and also feeling into kind of what we've seen play out over this past year with human connection, and kind of, again, just like touching on, what's gone on with the pandemic and isolation and quarantining and not being able to connect or commune in gathering spaces, and then things opening back up. And now there's a lot of communities where there is kind of these intentional spaces occurring where humans are gathering with an intention to connect. And like one thing I experienced this year, among other settings of being in groups, was a cacao ceremony that I got to take place in for the first time when I was in Phoenix several months ago. And just kind of, we don't have to, it doesn't have to be with plant medicine or with any certain thing that we can create intentional spaces for humans to connect. But I think it's really exciting, all the things that we're seeing where people are creating intentional spaces for connection, with connection at the forefront of the goal or kind of the end goal or the purpose of convening or being in groups together of like, all right, let's get a group together and let's do this activity together and it can be, even like yoga, for example. I'm part of a group in Phoenix called Higher Self Friendly where we're holding, meditation spaces and yoga classes to help all people connect with their higher self. It is aimed more towards or with the needs of the LGBTQ community in mind, but it's open to everyone. And so I guess what I'm saying is there's so much already going on, and then there's also spaces in people and communities that are not not involved in these connection spaces as much, or maybe don't know that they're available, or maybe still don't feel safe going into them for whatever reasons, and looking at that and kind of continuing to build those spaces and make them even bigger, and continuing to connect with other people, whether it's breathwork workshops or cacao circles, or I had an experience as well this year. I got to do a sweat lodge, the beautiful friend and guide, and there's just so much there. And I think we're seeing that of humans kind of returning to many of the ways that our ancestors did connect with each other, or did sit in circles or in communities. And I think the potential for where we can keep going with that and need to keep going with that is just deeper. Like we can hypothetically, you could create a connection circle or space with other people around anything, right? It could be like, let's all get together today and go to the park, or let's all participate in a puzzle, or let's all have, poetry reading together, all these things. And that is happening in a lot of different ways. And so it's exciting to see people exploring, like, what's an interest of mine that I've already had, but now I want to go find like-minded folks and go experience this space of deeper connection. And I think when you enter that space of connecting with other people and set an intention to like show up as your highest self and allow that connection and resonance to occur, and kind of surrender to the experience and just know that what's going to come out on the other side of being in a group of people who are all there with the desire to connect so deeply, it's like, yeah, there's nothing like it in the world. Human connection is so powerful. So I think continuing the dialogue with each other and with ourselves around, like, what am I desiring out of connecting with others, and what feels safe, and where are my boundaries, and am I doing the like energetic and physical upkeep to make sure that like my energy that I'm putting out there into the world is like I can afford to give out energy because my own cup is filled, that kind of thing again. So I guess one thing this year is I developed a dance workshop that I'm really passionate about, that's not anything too complex, but it just kind of moves through a series of songs and postures, but it helps people come into their bodies and kind of develop some basic stuff around boundaries. And I think like if we're showing up into these connection spaces with that in mind, and again with this deeper intention to connect way deeper, and also looking at like you asked about like what do I think the future in 2022 looks like. I think there's going to be a lot of people moving into communal spaces, creating gardens together, living off the grid, like getting land together, doing whatever. And I think it's important to look at that from like a sustainability with the earth perspective. And it's important to look at a sustainability with each other perspective, and connecting deeper, and trusting that like we're going to find the places and the communities and the spaces that we're meant to be in 2022, and like can step into our highest self and our deepest calling and service to humanity. And that when we have a space where we're deeply connected with other people and valuing connection really deeply, it just gives us that foundation to go even higher with what we can create and experience in this world. So was there any pieces I missed or didn't touch on?
I mean, I think there's 100 more pieces that we could
everywhere.
touch on, but no, that was great. That I think the main thing I wanted to reflect back is just to thank you for highlighting that these spaces for human connection in kind of a different container do already exist. There are more and more of them popping up. There are more and more alternatives to typical human connection spaces that still are the most prevalent in our society. And again, not to judge that or say they're wrong, bad, or anything like that, but I think there are probably more and more people looking for something different or not wanting to be limited to certain specific contexts and how they can experience socializing and human connection with others.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one more thought I'll throw in there because I just remembered the piece speaking to that piece around connecting with alcohol. Thank you for that. And you're right. And I think, again, this like takes me back to thinking like, wow, how resilient are human beings? Because like we're continuing to evolve and adapt and be like, okay, so this space is a space where we could connect. And like you said, it's not about shaming or judging or saying that it's like bad to connect with other people in a bar setting or with alcohol or anything. I think more so I'm looking at it the way that kind of highlights human behavior and the human desire for connection is it's like it doesn't matter what avenues or what options we have or what exists, and it's like part of the human spirit that wants to connect and is always going to find a way to connect is always going to find a way to connect. So if the only thing that our society or communities have available to them is like, well, there's the local watering hole, like, yeah, people are going to be going there and people are going to be connecting. And yeah, it might not be ideal to have to use or feel like one has to use alcohol like to lower inhibitions or like as, a social lubricant, but like people are like humans are just so resilient and we're so wired for connection that we're going to find it's like a little, mice or rat finding its way through the maze to the cheese. It's a funny analogy to use, but it's like the cheese is connection and feeling seen and heard and witnessed. Like that is what we're here to do and experience as human beings. So it's like, it's exciting when we start putting the human experience at the top of the priorities, like you said. It's like, imagine all the possibilities. Like, it's limitless. So, yeah, pause there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a great note to end on of there's so much that can be built upon even just a small group of deeply connected humans. And like when I think back to like the most challenging times in my life, there's kind of like two different things that got me through. One was my continued dedication to my mission and purpose and my relationship with myself. I think that is a very, very important piece and probably the foundational piece to start. It's like if I don't have a relationship with myself, then I actually don't really know how to have a relationship with other people. But then the other, equally important component in very many ways is there's been certain people in my life who I have a deep connection with that have supported me in moving through those challenging spots and continuing to support me to become more of who I am. And that is so important. And I feel like our society would just benefit from more opportunities for us to build those deeper connections with other humans that a lot of people don't have the fortune of having too many of those type of connections. I remember seeing a post the other day, I think it was from Aubrey Marcus, and he was talking about, if you were to just take a journal page and just write freehand, just your most like vulnerable, the most vulnerable pieces of what's coming up for you right now. And now think about sharing that with someone. Is there even one person who you could share that with and you would feel safe to do so? And a lot of people, the answer is I don't really have anyone who I could share like my deepest, most vulnerable parts of myself with. That's unfortunately a lot of people's answer in our society today. And, maybe not even their partner. And I'm fortunate that I actually have a number of people who I could really share some of those most deep, vulnerable parts. And I think that I just have a feeling that if we had more of those deep connections, if every human had at least 5 people they could share anything they needed to with, man, what a different society that would be. Man, how different would we view our problems and our struggles and our challenges, and how much deeper compassion and empathy would we have for other people, that we don't default to this place of like blame or judgment or trying to tear others down, but rather like, yo, like, how can I support you? Wow, like, I really feel you. Like, you really must be hurting there. Like, how can, what support do you need to like move through that and to overcome that current challenge? Like, I think the power of human connection, like genuine, deep human connection, can't be understated. I feel like we could do anything that we need to as a society if we could all have just like 5 people who are just like, yo, I'm here for you no matter what.
That's really powerful. Wow. Thank you for that. I love that idea. And it's making me like so excited. I'm like, what model can we create and how can we start like now to get, creating this network. And I think the quote to me came to mind of like, we can only meet others as deeply as we met ourselves. And I really like that. And like, the kind of converse of that is like, if we can only meet others as deeply as we've met ourselves, we can meet ourselves through meeting with others deeply. I feel like kind of right? Like, so it's like scary. Like that's a scary thought in some ways for me to think about, like, whoa, writing all that down on a piece of paper and then sharing that with some people. And yet, like, some of the most liberating experiences I've had in my life is when I do that. I go into a space of being like, okay, I'm going to share this like really vulnerable thing. It's probably going to feel really uncomfortable. I have a lot of emotional and even physiological responses that come up for us, right? When we like share that with people, and like it takes courage and an open heart and going there. And I think people knowing, like, if you knew someone isn't going to judge you or can hold that kind of space, then it's like, when we give people opportunity to do that for us, it's really giving ourselves a gift and it's giving them a gift too. And then like they're going to turn around and interact with other people like in a deeper way. Like, I'll just say, like, and as an example, I feel really grateful that I have met you and connected with you, and like the nature of the way that we drop in together, like even take deep breaths together as we're traversing through some of these like really intense, sometimes really, painful or vulnerable things that we talked about like earlier today. Like, that's kind of given me a new standard or a new way of looking at connecting with other people. And I felt that shift just in like the first few weeks when I had originally met you. It was kind of like I was recalibrating how I was viewing connection in some ways. And I think like that's a cool thing to think about, because we can always be doing that. We can always be deepening the ways that we connect to other people. So I love that idea. Like, even if people started with 3 people instead of 5, like pick your 3 and then like tell them, hey, this is what we're doing. So like, if you could give me an hour of time today, and then let that person feel the effects of that. And then that's going to transform probably how they connect with other people and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think the only last piece I'll add to that, I think that's beautiful what you just shared, and that makes me so happy to hear that like things have been shifting in you as they have with me. Like, our first conversation was really powerful and impactful, and it really opened up my capacity and what I saw as possible for human connection with someone who I've just met, having a first conversation with, and like how it's less about how long I've known someone, and it's really more about who they are and what work they've done in themselves and how they're showing up and how open their energy is, and like, you know, if I've gone there and I'm willing to go there in myself, and likewise you as well, then like we can actually, it's not like it actually takes, in a certain way, it's not like it takes time to build a connection. It's almost like I felt like the connection was just revealed. It's like we already had deep relationships with ourselves, and we had certain similar resonant threads of connection that just all of a sudden like became more material. It's like it materialized, and then we were able to enjoy those connection threads that were already like ready to be experienced with each other. And I think the other piece I'll add, just as kind of a one more practical takeaway, is you know, I think the path to having several people in one's life that you can share the more deep, vulnerable pieces of oneself is really doing that with yourself, you know, starting by literally just writing it down. There's probably so many people who are afraid to even write down some of the deeper, more vulnerable truths about their experience. So I think just writing to start is one step. Maybe a next step is going in front of the mirror when nobody's home and just like vocally speaking that out loud. Like maybe just speaking about a traumatic experience that you've had in your past, just to make it more real for yourself and to get more comfortable and to build capacity within yourself to be able to hold that energy, which might feel so big, too big at first. But, you know, in my experience, like every human that I know who's done this type of work, like has the capacity to build more capacity. And it just takes practice sometimes, like just takes practice. And I think once you get comfortable sharing a difficult truth or experience with yourself, now you can find one other human and you're like, man, I think, you know, I'm at least, you know, confident that this person is likely going to be able to hold space well for me. And maybe they won't be perfect, and maybe you won't come out perfect, but just like, hey, you know, I have this thing that's been weighing on me. Like, it would be okay if I can share that with you. And, you know, maybe it doesn't go perfect, but no matter how that person receives it, hopefully they receive it really well. And even if they don't, you know that you still have yourself, and now you get to go back to your room and just keep getting more and more comfortable. And I really believe like when someone is ready, like there's going to be someone else to hold space for that thing if it's ready to be shared in a bigger capacity. And then you get to be like Shel over here at the beginning and sharing some very vulnerable pieces of your journey. But you've built the capacity to be able to do that and to hold that energy within yourself. And now you get to really be of even greater service to others, and being able to witness that.
I love that. Thank you. That's so true. This might be a funny analogy. I'll just like quickly state this, and then I don't have like too many other things there. But like for me, the feeling of like the rush that comes when you share something really vulnerable with someone, and it is a safe container and it is a safe space, and you know that they have the bandwidth to hold space for you, and you can go there with them. Like, I don't have the words for that kind of feeling. It really does feel like sliding down a water slide of like beautiful like pool water into a huge abyss of a water fountain. Like, that's a interesting analogy to use, but it's just a feeling of like free falling into connection, and it can feel really scary. But when you also have that pent up feeling of all that shame or that fear or that maybe silence or not shedding light on something, and then you are able to step over that line and share that with someone, and that person is, you know, in a space where they can hold space for you and receive it and witness you and honor the depth of your share and be like, they don't even have to necessarily do anything other than just listen and be there. And they also knew or know that you need to share something deep. Like, I do feel like that's one piece just worth slightly briefly touching on or mentioning, is the topic of consent. And like, before if we are going to share something really deep or really intense or quote unquote gnarly with someone, like maybe make sure that they're ready, because that's just like a nice thing to do out of respect and consideration for them and their emotional cup and their energy and their bandwidth and what they're working with that day. It's good to, check in, but like once you have that green light and then you go there together, it's like this whole new space of fertile ground and opportunities is created, and it's just such a release when the topic or whatever is shared. It's just like, wow. Then you realize you've crossed over this huge kind of scary thing, and like you said, then it's like, where else can we go now? Like, and you want to keep doing it. You want to keep like connecting deeper and deeper, and whether that's with other humans and with yourself, it's like, and then keep evolving that way. So it's in healing.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was amazing, and I'm so glad that we were able to do this and have the long-awaited follow-up conversation to our incredibly powerful conversation lost in the ether.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to land this one, and it's felt super good. And wow, 2 hours just flew right by, and I'm sure we could have gone for at least 2 more.
Yes.
But we'll have to save that for the follow-up at some point.
Definitely.
Just thank you for your vulnerability, for your authenticity, for just like sharing your whole heart, and for being just such a trailblazer in your own right. I'm really inspired by the path that you walk and the healing that you're doing and the work that you're doing in the world, and just like the energy that you bring to the world, and the play and the fun and the smiles and all of that. So like, thank you. I'm really honored to be your friend and to have this conversation with you, and I'm just so looking forward to more. And also just at the end of this conversation, feeling even more hopeful for our future, and just I have an even deeper faith in humanity, and thank you for inspiring just an even deeper level of that within me.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all that. And I'm likewise really inspired by you and by all the work that you do and what you put out into the world, and just who you are and your bravery as well going into these conversations. And I also feel really, really honored to be here today. I'm really grateful. And it's a really exciting way to end 2021. It's kind of a rocky year, but I think this is a really, really beautiful and profound ending to it. And just, I'm really excited to have more conversations, and I'm grateful for your friendship and that you asked me to be on here today, and then we got to do this conversation again. And it's meant to go out into the world this time, and that's really exciting. So thank you so much, and it's an honor, and thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for all the deep breaths. This is by far the most deep breathing I've done in a podcast episode so far, and it felt really good. So you set a high standard for the deep breaths.
I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome.
And something we could all use more of.
Yeah.
Collective deep breaths, exhale, sighs.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you, the lovely RockShel, for joining the program today. Everyone, please, I'll link your social media, however you want to be connected with, in the comments and whatnot. If you want to follow more of her work, then please feel free to follow. And thanks again for joining, and looking forward to next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nathan.